hit the ball out of the yard and BP particularly often. So I mean, that's a big impact right there. And Kenny Jones has been banged up. It feels like all year. Like they thought he was going to be a guy who would hit double-digit home runs for them, and he hasn't been a real power guy. I know he looks really intimidating in there in the box, and he's a good hitter. South Carolina's best hitter last year with runners in scoring position, but just it hasn't translated as much as we thought into a power hitting capacity. And the fact that he's been banged up hadn't helped, so he hasn't been supplying some of those extra base hits. Henry Kasmer had more extra base hits when he was at Ohio State than is kind of translated. And a couple of these guys are young. Bo Hollins, KJ Scobie. They're going to hit some doubles. They're going to hit some home runs, but just haven't hit maybe as many yet as they will in time because they're young. So I didn't think that South Carolina would be anywhere near the top in home runs, extra base hits. I thought they would be closer to the middle of the pack than what they are, though.
John, kind of pivoting to this series this weekend, I kind of alluded to it as like a desperation bowl of
when you can start out 1-8 in the league and make it into the NCAA tournament, and if you lose this series for either one, you aren't feeling really good about yourself at all. South Carolina's got to go out to Texas A&M next week too, which is, neither of these teams, Mississippi State or Texas A&M, have played great baseball yet, but both of them are teams that put together really great rosters in the offseason and felt like they had College World Series caliber programs. So, these aren't teams that are short on talent. South Carolina's lost a couple of their top guys, has a couple of their top guys banged up, and, they haven't played great baseball yet, haven't really put it together to even approach where their talent level is, which isn't, in my opinion, as high as Mississippi State or Texas A&M for that matter. But I do think that South Carolina has hit on a couple of things here recently, and do have a couple of guys who are stepping up and playing better, like a Bo Hollins is really starting to settle in. Caleb Jones, I think you may have found something with him out of the bullpen. Jarvis Evans looked really good last week in a starting role. Like Jake McCoy's really, really close. And I don't know if this is the weekend where he goes out and throws 6 or 7 and only gives up 2 and strikes out 10, but that's not far away for him. South Carolina, I feel like, is starting to piece it together a little bit, even though it may not look that way. But I think they've got a chance to go out there and comes out to 2 wins or not. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. But I think they're starting to play a little bit better baseball.
John, you mentioned Bo Hollins, and I want to ask you about
him, who are hitting anywhere from 3 to 6 in your batting order, depending on a given day, depending on what Benary wants to do with Hall and Petrie. So, I mean, there is a lot on these guys. And, the first baseman handles the ball a lot. I mean, I know you just think of a first baseman just standing over there and catching throws, but a first baseman handles the ball a lot. And Bo, I think, has done a pretty good job of understanding, the defensive responsibility that he has. KJ has done a phenomenal job over there at third base. I know he's got a few errors here and there, maybe a bad one or two, but, he's been so good over there at one of the toughest positions to play. So, I think that they've done a great job of understanding what's on their shoulders and, not getting overwhelmed. I think they've done a really nice job, overall this season and also in SEC play. I mean, Hollins is hitting 286, Scobie's hitting 278. Both of them have a home run and a couple RBIs. I mean, they're doing well, and if they keep playing the way they're playing, and some of the guys around them can continue to play the way they play, you're looking for the breakthrough at that point, not trying to find the talent. You're looking at the breakthrough, looking for the breakthrough in terms of, getting the big hit and scoring the runs. Yeah.
John, good stuff as always, bud. Appreciate you. We'll try to pull the Gunners through, especially this weekend and then Tuesday against Real Madrid. But I'll talk to you before then. I am sure. Enjoy the weekend.
Absolutely.
Thanks, bud.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
That's our good friend John Whittle, John M. Whittle, to follow on Twitter if you're not already, and his work and Hale's work and many others, thebigspur.com. We'll stay with Carolina baseball. A couple of thoughts from Coach Maneri as the postgame show rolls on from Columbia and Tampa on this Thursday. Homeowners, now's the time when a lot of us make some changes around the house. Now, you could just be a quick spring clean, or maybe you're looking around once you cleaned up and go, this place could use like a complete refresh. Might be time to tap into your home's equity, and Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union has a great opportunity for you with their home equity line of credit. You can unlock your home's equity and access your line of credit over a 10-year period. So you could fix up a kitchen or a bathroom right now. Maybe since it's, outdoors time, maybe you're thinking, the family needs a deck or a screen porch, or maybe a pool, whatever it is. Listen, you know how much equity you have. You work with the folks at Palmetto Citizens, and you figure those things out, all right? So check them out today at palmettocitizens.org. Better yet, stop in and see any of their great professionals at 14 convenient Midlands locations. Join my wife and me as members at Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union. Welcome back in. Postgame show rolls on this Thursday. Thanks again to John Whittle for joining us. Some sound from Coach Maneri coming up in a bit. We were talking jam bands earlier. Here's one. Lettuce. Saw them at St. Patrick's Day. Terry Ford's taken over at Master Control. I did think of one of those fish cover band names, Runaway Jim. It's Runaway Gin, excuse me. It's a play on two different fish songs. I was trying to come up with it in my head, and, you know, an old jam band guy, if you follow my drift. So
No, I know why you can't think of it. I get it. I get you.
Runaway Gin. It's a play on Runaway Jim, which is a fish song, and Bathtub Gin, which is another fish song. So they put them together.
Well, you can't remember because of all the gin you've had at these gigs.
Yes, that's what I do. I just take a big old bottle of gin.
I just carry it
Make
around.
my own. That's what the song's about. Bathtub Gin. You know, it's so you just make your own, like they used to in the old days.
Carry that with all the X's on the bottle.
Gin is disgusting. If you people that love, like my wife likes a gin and tonic every once in a while. I know my mom did. You know, if you like a gin and tonic, that's cool. I think gin, like I'm not a big liquor guy regardless, but gin is to me just vile.
I've always been more brown liquor. I'm not a huge gin guy either.
I just think, but gin, I'm just like, ugh.
Yeah. I've never been big on gin and tonic at all.
And what it's juniper berries, right? Is that what gin is?
I think
Dave
you're right.
says yeah.
Yeah, Dave knows. Dave's drank a lot of gin.
Elijah, do you make bathtub gin? No, we don't have Elijah pulled.
An
Hang on.
innuendo for something.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't do gin. Sorry. But anyway, Runaway Gin.
Well, Elijah does anything that involves liquor.
Well, I think Elijah's like me. I think Elijah enjoys a quality craft beer, right? More than
I love craft beer. That's the go-to, and I'll drink liquor occasionally. Like I don't mind bourbon. I've drank more bourbon maybe in the last 2 years than the rest of my 20s combined. But I had gin once, like one night, and like that next, like I remember like falling asleep on the couch, waking up the next morning, and being just repulsed with how my breath smelled. It was atrocious to the point where I never want to see a gin bottle
Elijah
ever again. I wasn't even hungover.
He also
I was
drinks
just so grossed
convenience
out.
store beer. I watched this at SEC Media Days there.
Yes. Yes, as a tall boy. Sometimes a tall boy Miller Lite after a long day of work, it hits double hard.
Sure.
You know, sometimes it's not like I love my craft beer, but every now and then, like a good Miller Lite, takes me back a little bit.
I just didn't want you to say that you've been drinking more bourbon the last 2 years because you've been working with somebody new.
Not quite. Now, if I said I've been drinking more gin at that point, then we might have to get me some professional help.
I can drive people to drink. I'm fully aware of that. I assure you.
I've drank more bourbon in the last 3.5 years.
Again, whatever it takes, man. I am here to support the liquor distribution business. That's what I'm here for. So if it means I got to drive you to drink, then so be it. Thanks again to John Whittle for joining us. I will say, and then we're going to hear from Coach Maneri here. And in fact, Terry, if you don't mind, just get cut 14 ready, please, sir. But Elijah, look, John's not going to hold anything back, and he knows his baseball program inside and out. But I can't say I was surprised or anything like that by his response, but he was not at all a fan of the shuffling of the lineup the other night.
Not at all, which is kind of what prompted my follow-up with, do you think this is just something out of, lack of better words, like desperation, like trying to throw something to the wall and seeing if it sticks, right? Like when you're in a losing streak, like Billy Martin used to do the old draw names out of a hat and bam, there's your lineup. Like no rhyme or reason to it at all. How much of it was like desperation? How much of it was like, this is a baseball decision because we think this is going to work? Given how guys hit, but John's reasoning makes total sense, and I guess never thought of it like that.
I didn't
It makes perfect sense because I think me and you were kind of more fixated on just the moving of Nathan Hall from 1 to 3, without maybe taking into as much of an account like the separation of your RBI hitters, right? If you have like certain good RBI hitters, isolating them does in theory not make a ton of sense.
Yeah, and Paul in postgame did say, what we had kind of alluded to before the game. Like, here's probably why he's going to do it. But let's hear more. Here's Paul Maneri from Carolina Calls last night with why he made that adjustment, moving Nathan Hall and Ethan Petrie down in the order.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly why we did it. You know, I love Nathan Hall in the leadoff spot. He's done everything I hoped that he would be, a great blend of power and speed, tough to strike out. I mean, you know, if we had a 1 through 9 great lineup, then I'd leave him in the leadoff spot. But we're just having trouble scoring runs because, you know, we're just not getting enough big hits. And in my opinion, he's one of our 2 best hitters on the team. And I just want to see him bat more, have a chance to bat more frequently with guys on base. And the idea that it would produce more runs. He came through last night with the big RB. It was a 2 RBI hit, I believe. Yeah. And kind of broke the game open for us. So, you know, if we can figure out now 1 and 2, yeah, then it gives a chance for Hall and Petrie to do something, you know, extraordinary. You know, I mean, the North Carolina game was great where we led off with back-to-back home runs. But, you know, solo home runs are, you know, you're not going to win a lot of games just with solo home runs. We need multi-run home runs. And, you know, if they're not hitting with runners on base, then it's impossible to hit a multi-run home run. So, you know, the way you beat good teams like Mississippi State or Tennessee or whoever you're playing in our league is you have to have your best players do something extraordinary. And just getting on base is not enough. You know, they have to produce runs. And, you know, I just think if more guys get on base in front of them, then we'll have a better chance. I got to figure out who can get on base in front of them.
That's Paul Maneri, and obviously that was not, my apologies, that was not Carolina Calls.
I was like, is that Derek singing in the background?
That is not, yeah, that is not.
I didn't know he had the full band behind him and everything.
That is not Backstreets. That was batting practice. Evolved. Yeah, so my mistake there. But
common mix-up.
Look, again, I can see all of it, and I think to your question, Elijah, is this just something that you just felt you just needed to kind of do more from a gut perspective? I feel like there is some of that here. I doubt this is all completely analytics driven. I just think it's a matter of trying to put some guys in different roles, you know, putting different responsibilities on maybe players that are a little bit more accustomed to it, you know. And again, the 3 and 4 hole, I'm not breaking news here, but the 3 and 4 hole hitters are obviously so important. Listen, you can make a case for why every hitter in a lineup is important. And I think back, you know, these days too, of how many, especially now, Elijah, that we have basically the universal DH now that the National League has done away with pitchers hitting. You know, so many coaches and managers across the sport will use that 9 hole almost as a second leadoff guy, whereas in the old days, that was the pitcher, you know, or in the old American League, the 9 hole guy was the worst hitter, 8 and 9, you know, and these days it's changed because of analytics. Hey, I can get a guy who can slap it around. Maybe he's not going to have a huge slugging percentage, but he'll always be on base. You know, maybe he's a base stealer. So I just think trying to find, I'm more with what you ask. I just think something had to be done just to make it different. You don't want to make wholesale change. You're not clearing the bench. You're not putting your best guys somewhere they shouldn't be. You're not having Petrie hit 7th or anything like that.
Right.
You know, but you need to find a way to do something. And to John's point too, you know, maybe this doesn't last. Maybe this was, let's just see if we can get you going, and then we kind of reorganize back to what is most efficient.
Yeah, and that's, you don't want to be too experimental once you get to April, right? You like to think of mid-February when the season begins, and kind of the month of March as maybe that time. But that's just kind of the crossroads this team is at right now, given their SEC record, given what's coming up with what's a very winnable series against an also struggling Mississippi State team, and the opportunity that we just talked about, like having that on the road. You'd like to maybe see if you can find something going into that can give you a little bit of an edge, especially if it's a particular order that Mississippi State hasn't seen before. So I think that might help in that regard. But part of the lineup that I did kind of like is, you know, if you can get those first 2 guys on base, having Nathan Hall, who may be your most reliable on base guy, to be able to knock a few home, which he did against Presbyterian, and you heard Coach Maneri allude to that as well. That maybe that's the rationale for it. Maybe that at least the top of the order can help if you trust those first 2 guys in the order to get on. Which, if they prove they can, then this is a smart move. But a lot of it's going to be dependent on how well do those first 2 guys get on base, because that really is what's going to matter in terms of just engineering more runs. And if it does work that way, then maybe you stick with it just solely because it works. But that's what makes this series more interesting than just two teams desperate for a win. This could also determine whether or not we see certain changes in the lineup stick or not.
Gamecocks at State this weekend. Come back on the other side. Interesting breaking NFL news and a very random fact that I found today that I want to share with everybody. You're listening to the Postgame Show. Welcome back into the postgame show here on a Thursday afternoon. Jay Phillips in Columbia. Terry Ford's at Master Control here in the Herndon Chevy Studios. We'll talk jam bands throughout the afternoon. Or not. Elijah Campbell is in.
I'm curious on your take on if the Allman Brothers are a jam band. I don't.
No,
think
they're
that's
not.
been
They're
discussed
just
on these airwaves.
they're very album-oriented Southern rock.
Okay.
Yeah, not a jam band.
I'm sure. Yeah,
I think
I'm
what
sure
made me
it's a take
angriest
you're
about
talking
that guy, because I told Terry I hadn't even thought about that guy in a while, and if you missed the story, a few years ago when Terry and I were doing the halftime show together, you know, the conversation of rock and roll music comes up often, and I am a jam band fan, and the Allman Brothers are a jam band, were a jam band, and they are. I'll say are. You can still listen to their live music, and anyway, this guy was incredulous that I was, again, he thought I was disrespecting them, which. Again, if you know, not at all. Far from it.
Does he think jam band is some type of like rock and roll slur?
Yeah. He thought I was disrespecting them. He did. He genuinely believed that putting the label jam band on the Allman Brothers was disrespect. He said they're Southern rock, and I was like, they're both, and that's perfectly fine. And then I asked him if he had seen them live, and he said he had, and I'm like, no chance. It's like no.
You would not reach that conclusion.
There's just no chance. Either maybe you went once, and like you were lit and you don't remember it. But there's no way
Plausible.
that you ever saw the Allman Brothers live and then come back going, oh no, they sounded just like they do on their albums. Because I can assure you with every fiber of my being, as Vito Corleone would say, on the souls of my grandchildren. The Allman Brothers do not sound live like they do on their albums because they're a jam band and they like to go. And you know what? They're really freaking good at it. So
I'll
there's
take
that.
your word for that,
Oh,
and that fits the criteria. It's sound logic to me.
So that's just
No
my
pun
point of
intended.
view. That's just my point of view. Anyway, a couple of things here. Then I'm going to give you what I thought was a cool random fact that apropos of nothing. All right, and I told Elijah, but I didn't tell him what it was. First off, the news the breaking news, the Las Vegas Raiders and Geno Smith today have come to agreement on a 2-year, $75 million extension. Would you have believed a few years ago that Geno Smith would be amongst like the top 10 paid quarterbacks in the NFL? No way.
Absolutely not.
It has incentives.
Absolutely not.
It has incentives that could go past $85 million. And 66.5 of this is guaranteed. Geno Smith is now 34 years old. Again, this is an extension, so he had a year left this year. So this will be a deal for 26 and 27. So he is locked in to the Raiders for a whole lot of money. So they will not be looking for anything in the draft other than help around him. And good for Geno, man. I mean, it's a great story.
Great for him.
It's a fantastic
This is the Raiders.
story. Yeah.
This is the Raiders like doubling down on taking him. Like I kind of figured this might be just like a gap year guy. You have him for this year. Let the contract expire, maybe find somebody in next year's quarterback draft, which is expected, I feel like, to maybe be a little deeper than this year's, and maybe just playing on, on draft market. But no, this is them saying, this is our guy.
Yeah.
We're going to use the last few years of his career
Good
here
for him. And again, the incentives,
to build.
I'd love to see. I like incentive-laden contracts, too. I got zero problem with that. Like, hey, let's see what more we can get out of you. And if you hit just certain benchmarks, we'll do a little bit better for you. But good for Geno. All right, again, I saw this on Twitter this morning, apropos, again, of absolutely nothing. Recently enough, though, you might remember the story of the astronauts who, were supposed to be up there for like 2 weeks, and then it was like 8 months or whatever. And we know now that there are pretty much always a few astronauts on the International Space Station, right? So... saw this today from Encyclopedia Britannica, and again, wasn't looking for it. It scrolled by, and I saw it. I was like, "Wow, that's pretty neat." Do either of you want to take a guess as to the last day when all of living humanity was on Earth at once? In other words, when no one was in space. I know it's going to be too hard, so I'll just go ahead and tell you because we don't have time.
1997.
You're close. It was Halloween Day. 2000. And then the next day, they put people back onto the space station. And ever since then, So again, apropos of nothing, but I just thought that was kind of cool. Like all of humanity was on Earth. It was
That's
Halloween
a fun fact.
of 2000. They launched, I guess, people the next day, got them up into space, and continuously there has been someone on the International Space Station or in a space shuttle or, Major Tom floating around. He's still up there.
The circuit's dead.
Yeah.
There's something wrong.
Well, but I just thought that was pretty cool. So 25 years.
That's
somebody
a
up there.
fun fact.
Yeah. All right. Jordan Kay talking spring football next hour. We'll have some thoughts from Lenora Sellers staying with that subject and more from Elijah in Tampa. It's the postgame show. 4 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. Welcome back into the post-game show. Jay Phillips, Terry Ford at Master Control inside the Herndon Chevy Studios, and Elijah Campbell running on coffee and whatever else.
Celsius. Yeah, that was the caffeine choice of the day, man.
All right, there you go. But
Too tall Celsius.
Elijah left Columbia a little before 5 a.m. and made his way down to Tampa. Has already done locker room availability with the Gamecocks. Carolina and Texas tipping off tomorrow night a little past 7 o'clock. Kind of feels, even though it's not a tour, it kind of feels like the Gamecocks now maybe are beginning to wear revenge a little bit. Elijah, did you get a sense of that in your availability today?
It would, in theory, yeah. You have some in-season revenge, right? You have to have revenge on somebody. Revenge worked as a pretty good motivating tool last season for all 38 games, don't you think? Leading up into the final game against the team that beat them in the previous year's Final Four. Today, not as much, because they, like, as a team, they're that one's less, revenge motivated, as much as it is, focusing on the familiarity and really just execution. And when talking to, it was a similar answer that I got from Chloe, from Joyce, even from Miriam, from Bree today. It's a lot of it's just getting in on loose balls, 50-50s, rebounding, those type of details, and executing. Because I think they're all very confident in their game plan against Texas. Because why wouldn't you be? You've seen proof of concept twice in double-digit wins against this Texas team. And you know that maybe the big difference between winning and losing against them is taking care of business on your part and executing your game plan, because your game plan works, especially when it comes down to locking up Madison Booker. Like, they've proven they can do it, and that they're pretty damn good at executing that game plan. So if they play their best, their biggest opponent tomorrow isn't the Texas Longhorns, it's the South Carolina Gamecocks. I think the revenge theme will play in a lot when we get to talk, if they win tomorrow night and we get to talk to them on Saturday, whether it be UConn or UCLA, because we all know exactly what happened the last time they played both those teams. It wasn't pretty. And those two games were two of the low points of the season, and they both snapped significant streaks that this program's had going. But today, it really did feel, Jay, like there is a keen focus on just taking care of the controllables, especially on the offensive end. Chloe mentioned on the offensive end, too. They've just spent a lot of time discussing what they need to clean up and what they need to do to be able to get back on track offensively, because they just won 2 games in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 without eclipsing 0.9 points per possession for entire games, which is impressive in its own right, but it also can be cause for some concern on maybe, I don't want to use the word dysfunction, because you can only have so much dysfunction to get to the Final Four, but maybe not operating at your highest capabilities at this point of the season on that end of the floor.
How much, and I look, they're not going to share, strategic secrets or anything like that, obviously.
I wish they would.
Yeah, I know,
love
right?
it.
Yeah,
love that stuff.
Yeah, so would the opponents.
They would.
But again, getting the bench going and those kind of things. Was there even peripheral talk of? Look, they understand they've got to, but did you get any sense from them on how to or what they want to do to get Joyce and Malaysia and Tessa back to their more accustomed roles?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because Sanaya talked about that a little bit. In the scrum with Sanaya, she mentioned, because she was asked a lot of questions about Malaysia Fulwiley, and clearly Malaysia is a national star as well as a local one too. And she's probably, the most notable face off the bench nationally for people that maybe don't follow this team on a day-to-day basis. But what Sanaya said about Malaysia was interesting, because obviously, Malaysia is very confident, right? And you can tell she plays with a lot of confidence. She kind of oozes that confidence. But Sanaya talks about just her teammates giving it to her as well. Like they tell her all the time, you can get to the rack whenever you want. And sometimes they try to talk her into attack mode, because they know they see it in practice every day. They see her do it in games. I mean, ever since she took the floor against Notre Dame and Paris in the season opener last year, it's one of those things, like, we know what you can do. We can see you get to the basket whenever you want. And Sanaya mentioned today just being more vocal about telling her, look, you got this superpower. Don't be afraid, to use it and to attack, because Malaysia Fulwiley is at her most dangerous when she's getting to the rim, because it does just open up the floor for everybody else. And sometimes scoring from the bench isn't necessarily their biggest superpower, right? It's the threat of them scoring. It's the threat of Tessa Johnson being able to knock down threes, which spaces out a defense. It's Joyce's ability to offensive rebound, which creates other points for other players as well, including maybe kick out threes. It's the ability of Mylasia Fulwiley to get to the basket that scrambles the defense because they have to overhelp sometimes, and that will also create shots for others. So it's those unique skill sets from those three main bench players that, outside of just scoring the ball, the threat of it, the offensive rebounding, the ability to scramble a defense by getting to the basket, that makes this offense operate at its highest level. And if you don't get that in a way that you didn't against Duke, you're going to have a really hard time beating a really good Texas team who also wants to maybe play in the 50s with you, because they can win that way too. And you're not going to be able to beat UConn or UCLA if you don't get those attributes from all three of those players.
You know, I know this is something that the team will not talk about. You and I had Brad Muller on yesterday's program, and we didn't really get into the word confidence or lack thereof right now. But, you know, we've all talked about Joyce Edwards' shooting percentage numbers going down, about Tessa almost just not wanting to take those shots that you just talked about, you know, and Mylasia maybe at times not wanting to pick that spot. How much have you been able to gather about that being the way these players are being defended? Is there a deference to the veteran players? Is it because the veterans have been out there more that maybe the subs just see themselves as placeholders for a minute? Because it's just not been the typical MO.
Yeah, the feeling that I've gotten, especially from my conversations with Joyce, is I've talked with Joyce over the last couple of weeks a lot about attacking double teams and how to approach getting double team more. She's probably getting double team more starting from that Indiana game all the way through the Duke game, more than she probably has in her career at times, except for, you know, maybe the occasional instances in high school. Like, the teams are defending her a lot differently, and she's talked to me a lot about what not to do in double teams. And like, Joyce is a real student of the game. I love just talking to her about basketball, even if it's not relating to South Carolina basketball, right? Like, when I was talking to her after the Duke game, she was when I approached her, she was watching UCLA and LSU, like, pretty intently, and like she's a real student of it. And when talking to her about how teams defend her, she talks a lot about, you know, I don't need to have my back to the double team, because when I do, I can't find where the double came from. And when you can't find where the double came from, whether it comes from the nail or the middle of the free throw line or the baseline, you don't know where that open spot's going to be. And that's what can cause to maybe like a 5 turnover game, or maybe what we saw, you know, against Indiana, where she struggled a little bit. That was really the biggest takeaway I had, you know, for her. Like, basketball, it can sometimes be like a puzzle, and I think sometimes they're not finding the correct piece because of some really specific details. And for Joyce, it's, for her, an emphasis that she's just brought up voluntarily, is just knowing where that double comes from. I know where the double comes from. I know how I can exploit it and how I can move the ball around and really get the defense to scramble, right? And I think that's one of the big things, too, is that they're getting guarded a little differently in the postseason than they were in the regular season. And that kind of brings me back to the three-point stat I brought up on every show I've been on today, that, you know, out of the 9 fewest three-point attempt games this team has had this year, 4 of them have come in the postseason. And if you're not knocking down threes, the threat of knocking down 7 or 8 threes in a game might not be there as much, which allows a team to be able to double team your post players. It allows them to pack it in, overhelp, or load up on the ball side, and it allows teams to be able to shrink the floor on you. And I think that's, in the games that we've seen them have their lowest offensive output, the floor has shrunk, right? You turn the ball over a little more because you're dribbling into crowds. You're not moving the ball as well. The ball may be sticking, or it may not be catching, you know, the ball might not be getting to shooters in rhythm. Tahina has talked about that a lot, is some of the offensive shortcomings this team has had maybe on the perimeters because the shot selection's not as good, because the shooters aren't catching it in rhythm. They're not getting enough rhythm threes, right? And when you're not getting enough rhythm threes, you're just not making a raw amount of three-pointers necessary to make a team have to space the floor a little bit. And when the floor is spaced and the threat of knocking down threes is there, that changes everything for you on the offensive side of the floor. So it really, to me, when it comes down to to the bench players, it's how can you create more threes? And for Joyce, it's not turning your back on the double team, knowing where that's coming. And for Malaysia, it's getting to the basket to scramble defenses. And for Tessa, you just got to make one or two, because if she makes 2 or 3 in a first half, you'll see exactly how differently defenses have to guard this entire 5 that's on the floor.
Well, and that becomes the question. And you mentioned Tahina, and one of the other things that, again, that I found interesting last week, not that it was in direct, conflict with her head coach, but again, Tahina mentioned after the Maryland game, we got to be the one to kind of bring the fight. And maybe for a second they did against Duke, but then Duke was able to really at least control the game plan. South Carolina won the basketball game, and that's all that matters in the end. But are you getting a feeling today, Elijah, in being around the team, that they once again want to be the ones to go assert themselves, that they want to be the ones to dictate? Or, again, as Dawn said in postgame after Duke, we'll absorb what they bring us, and then we'll figure it out?
I think right now it's more of absorbing what the defense gives you, and that's where I, just from a basketball theory perspective, maybe go against the grain with Dawn there, because she's talked about some in some of her press availability, talking about she doesn't like some early shot clock shots that they've shot so far in this tournament run, because she says that shot in the first 5 or 6 seconds of the shot clock, it can be there at the last 5 or 6 seconds of the shot clock. And my biggest, I guess, maybe disagreement from a basketball theory standpoint would be sometimes those shots in the first 5 or 6 seconds will be cleaner because you're not shooting it out of desperation, right? A shot at the end of the shot clock might be shot a little more in desperation or a little more of a hurry because there is that pressure of the shot clock winding down. I don't necessarily think shots early in the shot clock are that bad. Now, especially if they come from shooters who are really good in those specific spots, like Tessa Johnson. A corner 3 from Tessa, if there's 25 seconds on the shot clock, is every bit as good as anything you're going to get later on.
Yeah, if it's an open look, take it. Yeah, when she's got it, take it. Yeah, I'm with you there.
And even with Tahina, even when Tahina's contested at times, Tahina is like a career 40+% three-point shooter. I don't mind if she's letting one fly early in the shot clock, but I think there might be maybe it's an overemphasis on the type of shot that they get, and that might come from just maybe not even giving what the defense gives you. And maybe it's paralysis by analysis at that point, too. Sometimes when this team is at their best offensively, they play fast and they play pretty free-flowing, and those shots kind of just come to you organically. So that's maybe the one thing I'm really fascinated to see what they do against Texas in terms of trying to find their own rhythm offensively while also carrying the knowledge of a 3-game sample size of what this defense is going to throw at you.
Lots more from Elijah on this matchup tomorrow night coming up later on in the program. But on the other side of the break, our buddy Jordan Kay on the beat for the state newspaper covering Carolina football will join us. Spring ball about halfway through. What Jordan sees as maybe the biggest news notes so far, we'll do that when the postgame show returns. Welcome back in. Postgame show rolling on from a whole bunch of places. Well, downtown Columbia and Tampa. That's two, but it's more than usual. Elijah's in Tampa covering the women's Final Four. Terry and I here in downtown Columbia, and we're joined on the guest line now by our buddy Jordan Kay on the beat for the State paper covering all kinds of Carolina athletics, but we'll focus in on football right now. First off, happy April and halfway through spring football. How are you, sir? Oh, hang on, we'll get Jordan in just a second. There he is. There we go. How are you, Jordan? Good to have you.
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing well. I'm going to start you with what everybody wants me to ask you about, and that's the specialists. Because, I forget, we don't have to worry about quarterbacks right now. Offensive line looks pretty good. But seriously, you're replacing everybody, as Shane has said, and it's difficult to replicate that. But I'm interested because I do think it matters, especially for a special teams-minded head coach and someone who has a guy like Joe DeCamillis as his associate head coach and special teams coordinator. You're replacing all the snapper, holder, punter, kicker. What's that been like for this ball club? And I guess some return guys too, Jordan. I mean, really, this becomes a whole lot of questions for this football team.
Yeah, I think they're probably okay at, long snapper. Hunter Rogers was a good guy, was really good in coverage, but they got, 3 or 4 guys who are, just long snappers on the roster. And so I don't think that one's going to be too crazy. Holder, not really too worried about it. I think they feel really comfortable in Mason Love at punter. He was right behind Kai Kroger last year as just a true freshman, and Kai Kroger even said, if I was a freshman and this kid was on the roster, there's no way I would have been starting. So he understands Joe DeCamillis' thing. He probably would have been playing last year had Kai Kroger not been there. The real problem, though, is kicker. And this was a big thing last year after Chase Jeter transferred, and we were all kind of wondering, hey, are they going to go in the portal and get someone? Surely they're going to get someone. And they but missed a lot of big kicks. He missed a kick against LSU that was 49. He missed a kick against Alabama. And it just seemed like anytime you got beyond 45 yards, you were kind of flipping a coin or crossing your fingers behind your back. It just never felt secure. I think they've got to go get a kicker in the portal. It would just shock me if they didn't. You look at, basically they have 2 or 3 guys on the roster who are all walk-ons. They have Mason Love can kick field goals. They've got an incoming freshman coming in, but you got to go get someone in the portal. You have to shore this up. Alabama did it last year, grabbed a kid from Ohio or something like that. I think that's what has to happen. But other than that, I think they feel secure.
Jordan, one thing I'm fascinated with about this team right now is how you replace a lot of that defensive production. We're going to see a lot of Gamecocks, or former Gamecocks now, get their names called in the NFL draft over a 3-day span here later this month. Replacing that's not going to be very easy. You have some returning players that I know this coaching staff is really high on, but you brought in a lot of transfer players too that hold a lot of potential, even if there wasn't a ton of production at the last stops. Who are maybe some of those players, especially up front, kind of turning heads or forcing coaches to turn some heads so far here in the spring?
Yeah, I think one of those guys is Brian Thomas Jr. He's been on the roster for a while, and one of the guys you heard about last year who it was hey, if Kyle Kennard or Dylan Stewart aren't out there, watch out. This guy, he's been really good. He just doesn't get on the field a whole lot. So he's one guy to watch at the edge position, a dude who could go opposite Dylan Stewart and kind of have a similar Kyle Kennard impact. If you remember Kyle Kennard at Georgia Tech, he only had 4 or 5 sacks because he was the main dude. You get Dylan Stewart aside from you, all of a sudden you can't be double teamed and your production goes up a little bit. So that's kind of the hope for Brian Thomas. At linebacker, you're replacing everyone. There's no Debo Williams, no Demetrius Knight, no Bam Martin-Scott. And you start to look around and say, who is going to fill these shoes? One dude is probably Fred J.R. Johnson. He's going to be a sophomore. Played in 13 games last year, but basically all on special teams. The dude is a monster, and another one of those guys where if the linebacker room wasn't so veteran-laden last season, I think you would have saw him play a little bit more. aside from him, I think there's a bunch of guys competing. Sean Murphy's a transfer from Florida State, could be in the mix. A couple young guys as well. Then you look at kind of the defensive, the secondary. You have Jalen Kilgore, who it sounds like is going to stay at nickel. You've got to replace a safety in Nicky Minwori, who is otherworldly. Not a ton of guys that would really fit that bill. I think Peyton Williams is the one to watch. He played in the bowl game when Minwori opted out at halftime. And then corner, you got to replace him with O.D. Fortune. Probably Vakari Swain, though he's out of spring ball right now. A couple guys competing there. But, yeah, I mean, like you said, they have to replace so much, and that's what kind of makes this defense a question mark.
Talking to Jordan Kay of the State Paper, Carolina's spring ball about at the halfway point. Again, the spring game 2 weeks from tomorrow over at Williams-Brice. Let's move to wide receiver, and you just mentioned one Florida State transfer. Obviously, Dre Jacobs has now been here for a season as an FSU transfer. Didn't get a lot from him last year. Maybe didn't get as much from Jared Brown as people wanted at wide receiver. We know what Mazeo Bennett's about. We know what Nick Harbor's about. We know that Lenoris's younger brother, Jaden Sellers, is now on this team. What's that competition look like? But my primary question would be Dre Jacobs and Jared Brown. What more might Coach Furry be doing to try to get some veteran guys, up to a level that was expected of them?
I don't, that's a great question, and I think I haven't really thought a whole lot about it. I think the way Mike Furry described it, and he didn't talk too much about Dre Jacobs, but more on the Jared Brown. Jared Brown was like, the way Furry described it, a gadget guy. He was the dude you threw in there at Coastal Carolina. He'd catch a screen pass or a slip screen or whatever, and you had to really draw things up for him. Well, those gadget guys, as Furry described, it doesn't work in the SEC. If you bring the dude on the field, everyone's going to know, hey, the gadget guy's in. So they've got to really just work on, developing their whole route tree. And they could be guys that almost get left behind a little bit because this freshman class with these 5 guys are so dang good that, Jared Brown and Vandrevius Jacobs are going to have to really step up their game to see some playing time. It could be one of those situations last year with, Dale Von Campbell, who was they've got this big, 6'5" transfer. What's he going to do? And it was felt like 5 passes, because everyone else was just better than them. So I think they're going to really have to compete and kind of round out their game if they want to see the field, because the way these freshmen have been hyped up, their competitiveness, what they did in high school, they're going to really challenge for playing time.
And on that note, sorry, Elijah, just real quick, Jordan, on that note, is there a belief, because a lot of things get fixed through recruiting is a term we hear. Are these freshmen just that much better than the bulk of what they've had on this? Because there's depth, Jordan, as you well know, but are they just better than the guys that are coming back, maybe Mazeo and Nick excluded from that question?
I think so. I think that's exactly what it is, and that's evidenced by the fact that South Carolina did not go after did not sign a single wide receiver from the transfer portal. If there were any doubts, they would have been in the portal and tried to get a Gage Larvadane of 2025. But I think every time that they looked at someone, they had to, hey, are their off-the-field things as good as we like from our freshmen, and do we think they're better than our freshmen? And a lot of times the answer was no. And so I think that tells you a lot about the state of what the coaching staff thinks of those guys.
And then real quick here, Jordan, too, you talked about what this coaching staff emphasized, in the portal. They bring in Rasul Faison in the running back room. Oscar Attaway's coming back. You saw him get a little bit more of the load maybe towards the end of the season, and especially in the bowl game, being the number 1 running back. But how much of that you think ends up being by committee once we get into the season?
I would imagine a lot of it. It just doesn't seem like either of those guys are like rocket standards in terms of their game. And maybe it changes. Maybe it's, hey, Oscar Attaway just looks head and shoulders above everyone else, or Faison is head and shoulders. But you would have to think it would be a lot closer to a running back by committee. And maybe there still is a number 1 running back. But last season, Rocket Sanders got 7 or 100 more carries than Oscar Attaway. and Rocket missed the game. So, I mean, it was pretty crazy how the discrepancy between the number 1 and number 2 running back. This season, I think you're going to see a lot more guys get carries, and it could be one of those situations where one game, if Faison is just killing it, they just keep him in, run with the hot hand, and maybe it's the next game Oscar Attaway is running really well, and they let him get the bulk of the carries. Until, I guess, we get to fall camp and can really start to see these guys in action a little more, I think we'll know more then.
Jordan, good stuff as always, bud. We appreciate you. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Appreciate you.
Jordan K. Again, thestate.com to follow all his Gamecock coverage. And on Twitter, Jordan K, K-A-Y-E _23. Jordan K _23 on Twitter. Some sound from Lenora Sellers, a couple other Gamecocks as we continue some spring football talk. You're listening to the Postgame Show.
From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Center, I'm Elijah Campbell. The few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways, starting with one on Barnwell Street near Laurel Street. Got another one on Blythewood Road at Wilson Boulevard. Clemson Road near Rame Road in North Springs. Colonial Drive at Academy Street. Kaiser Road at Platte Springs Road. And lastly, one on US 321 near Highway 215 and Monticello Road.
There we go. This is a bump. Welcome back into the post-game show. A little Pharrell, a little Daft Punk,
Oh, yeah.
old Nile Rodgers. I got hollered at by my buddy Van Zell when I didn't mention Nile Rodgers when I was talking about this bump, and I was like, why'd you leave Nile out? I was like, I'm sorry. Nile Rodgers.
Just not the first names you think of?
Well, no, but Nile Rodgers is just a genius, and I mean, whether it's Chic or his producing, he worked with the B-52s for a bit, and I mean, he's awesome. But that guitar sound that he came up with, that disco guitar kind of sound,
Yeah.
he is the man. He is. So I did. So Van Zell, if you're listening, thank you for making me remember that. That's Nile Rodgers in there as well.
That was the song of the summer, man, when I graduated high school. That's
a good
banger.
one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I got that. Y'all should see, for people
Good
who think I'm only, maybe I'll like put it out one day just so you can see it. But I have a playlist at home. Now I feel like the old guy because the kids all use Spotify. I use Apple Music. Mainly because once upon a time I got like a 1-year subscription and I just kept it. For free, and plus it's
Simple.
easier, and I just use all my Apple stuff. Anyway, I have a mix. I have several, but I have one that I just call House Mix. And anytime a song that I want to put in, right, you should see this thing, man. It's got everything, and that's in there. That one's in there amongst many others. There's like 100 and something songs, but if you think I'm just a jam band guy, see this mix, and you'll be like, oh, you're not lying. You really do like pretty much everything. Again, the only thing that's not in there, I took out the Gore.
Dang,
I took
really?
out the Anthrax. And again, I don't do like the pop country. Now there is some Johnny Cash in there. There's some Willie in there. There's some Sturgill Simpson in there. So again, for those who think
good stuff right there.
yeah,
brother.
for people I think I don't like country music, that's not true. I don't
You just like good country music.
Yeah, I just can't do. I can't do some of that. Just this, it's just all the same song, man. And I've joked with Patrick Davis before. I was like half these songs are written by the same 3 guys in some corner office in Nashville, aren't they? And he jokes, and he doesn't like that joke as much because he's a songwriter. I'm like, come on, though, man. Like, you don't write songs like that. And then
I call that Broadway music.
He'll acknowledge that no, he does not write songs like that. It's like, how many songs do I need to hear about going down to the river with my buddies drinking beer? I got enough of those. So
Right? Yeah, there's enough.
Yeah.
But they'll keep. The
first one. The first one was fun, whenever that was. But anyway, I do like that one. Real quick before we get into some sound from Lenore Sellers, you want to give me some semi bad news for me personally?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so yesterday and the day before, you and I were talking about people, and we had the audience chime in on athletes or entertainers that we would defy security for in an effort to just be in their presence for a few moments. And when you and I gave our picks, like you said Kobe or Shaq, and I said Dale Murphy or Robert Plant. And Stacy was listening yesterday, and on Twitter, Stacy sent me a notification that Dale Murphy himself will be in Columbia on Saturday, June the 28th at the really big, actually, South Carolina card show over at the fairgrounds. Guess who won't be in Columbia on Saturday, June the 28th?
Oh, no.
And
you would have had your chance.
You know, I've never met him in person. I have interviewed him before. And a great lady, Janice Schull, that used to work with us, and now she runs her own ad agency, and I'm a huge Janice fan. And she called me one day and said, Dale Murphy's coming in for an event. Do you want to interview him? And after I woke up from fainting, I said, yes, I do. And I'm telling you right now, Elijah, I'm not kidding. I'm so honest with all of you. I have no idea what we talked about. None.
You just blacked out.
I had
Just
Dale
from
Murphy
joy.
for like 12 minutes, and I don't know. I couldn't to this day. I don't know. I'm you know, when I say I'm good at what I do, I don't mean like y'all should give me awards. I'm good at what I do. What I mean is, like, I know how to ask questions. I know how to listen. I know how to respond, and maybe sometimes ask a question to follow up. I have no idea what I asked Dale Murphy. I don't remember it. I was so scared. I don't get scared. I mean, I've interviewed governors and senators and guys like Dr. J, you know, or people like that. Like, I've been fortunate in my career to have some pretty great guests. I was so scared when I was talking to Dale Murphy. So scared.
Well, you're talking to your childhood hero. Yeah, it's again, we ask for people to give those celebrities or athletes or whatever that to them are just larger than life, that they would, you know, break security protocol just to say that they hung around. That was one for you. So yeah, that's a totally warranted feeling and a response there. It's valid.
I mean, that's all. I've said before, like, all I wanted as a kid, you know, for all of us that grow up, that play sports and that want to, you know, admire and almost mimic our heroes, like, I wanted to be Dale Murphy. The difference is that I wasn't going to grow up to be, you know, 6'4", 220 and be able to crush baseballs 500 feet while also running like a gazelle and winning Gold Gloves in center field. But I wanted to be him. I wanted to be. But I do, man. I can tell you where I was sitting. It was in the old building. And when I can remember when we were done, I looked at Michael and I was like, I hope that went well, because I have no idea what we just did. Oh, man. So,
like,
but anyway,
we're still on? Are we still on? Were we good?
Yeah, you know, hey, Mr. Murphy, it's me, Jay. And you remember that game when you hit that home run against the Phillies?
That was so
that
cool.
That was great. That was you. When you won your Gold Glove, you know, it's like the Chris Farley show. That's how I was. Yeah, that was awesome.
That was awesome.
That was awesome.
Remember that stolen base against Montreal? That was awesome.
You remember when you won the MVP award the second time? You know, that was great.
I do. It was awesome.
Yeah. But anyway, if you're like me and you grew up a Dale Murphy or even Atlanta Braves fan, Murph will be here Saturday, June 28th at the South Carolina Card Show. This says more details coming on it, like this specific time that Murph will be signing autographs. But unfortunately, yours truly is not going to be in Columbia, South Carolina that day. So somebody can go for me, all right? Somebody go for me.
That's going to make it worse when they start sending you pictures. Someone's going to go for you on your, on your behalf, and they're going to start tweeting pictures, and they're going to tag you, and it's only going to make you feel worse.
Yeah. A couple of quick cuts here from Lenora Sellers. Mr. Ford, if you don't mind, please, sir. Cut number 2. These are all quick. Lenora likes to give you some quick hit answers, but we were just talking with Jordan Kay about wide receivers. Here's Lenora on working with a new crop of guys.
It's different. They're younger guys. And then, I mean, it just takes time for them to adjust. Got to get used to that, and then just work on them, making sure they're good, make sure their confidence is high, stuff like that. So,
look, that's a pretty short but stock answer. I think Jordan kind of nailed it for us, Elijah. They didn't go get a portal receiver. That tells us, I think, everything we need to know in today's world about their level of confidence in who they've brought in from the high school ranks, in addition to guys, again, like Mazio or Nick that are already on the ball club.
See, Jay, I'm a sucker for a good coach soundbite as much as anybody, but in our day and age of college football and just the way our media machine runs, man, you'll learn more about what these coaches really think about their teams with what they do as opposed to what they say. And by not doing anything in the portal to get receivers tells you exactly what they like about this wide receiver room, especially with a lot of those young guys, that they like the crop of receivers that they got. And you can probably tell because about what Lenoris thinks about him as well, not by what he says, but I can imagine that they've had that meeting with Lenoris and be like, you're discussing comfort level, discussing everything about the offense, and the receiver room comes up, and I guarantee you, he signed on to get this group.
Yeah. More from Lenoris on the other side, a couple other players, too. And, again, a lot to get to as Elijah is covering the women's Final Four down in Tampa. He was in the Gamecock locker room earlier talking with the team. We'll get into a lot more of his thoughts ahead of tomorrow's big semifinal matchup with Texas. You're listening to the Postgame Show.
It's been, people coming to me all the time, ask for pictures and stuff, ask for autographs. Just in public is very different, but it's fine.
That's Lenoris Sellers on how his life's changed around town since he scored that winning touchdown to beat Clemson. He says it's fine, Elijah. That's good. Get used to more, because now you're also one of the top 10 Heisman candidates going into the season. So life's going to keep changing.
It is pretty significantly. Yeah, I would say April 3rd of 2025 is significantly different in the life of Lenoris Sellers than it was April 3rd of 2024. Don't you think? A little bit?
I do, a little bit. But it's fun to see his growth. And look, I think this is his team now. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And what I like about it, too, and this isn't about any other quarterbacks. This is about Lenoris and what Shane has wanted. But they knew this. You know, I think you go back to when they realized we need to go get this kid. You know, he had committed very early to Syracuse. And I think they were still figuring out their quarterback room. But once they realized it, not only that, but we were told right away, Elijah, this is going to be his team. You know, this isn't a matter. I mean, look, there's always competition. They didn't just say, hey, all you got to do is come here and you're going to be the guy. He had to, you know, he still had to go through the rigmarole, if you will, of getting the job. But they had such big plans for him, because they knew instantly, everything I've heard, you know, that this is not just a quarterback. This is someone that people gravitate toward. That they want to be around, that they want to play for and with. But now that takes on a whole new dynamic, because now the national spotlight shines significantly brighter. And I don't know if that, you know, we have no idea yet who they're taking to media days. You know, Shane may decide not to take a redshirt sophomore, even if he is a Heisman candidate. And yet, when you're a Heisman candidate, there might be some pressure to take him. You know, who knows? Who knows? But even if he doesn't go, there'll still be plenty of attention around him. But yeah, get used to it, young man, because life, it's only going to get busier.
Oh, yeah. And, well, you saw, you know, like using last year as an example, he didn't maybe necessarily take, like, the best overall players to media days, but he took basically what you can account for as, like, the team spokespeople, right? Like Boogie Huntley, Debo, Luke Doty, like those type of guys being used basically as, you know, the, like, extensions of the message that Shane wants out there for this team. And I think you might, like, Lenoris is kind of getting into that point, too. He's going to become a more... I guess more of a vocal leader on this team as well. You know, he's one of those guys that definitely leads by example. I wouldn't be surprised to see him hanging out with us in Atlanta here in a few months. But I mean, yeah, it's any time you end the season the way he did, whether it be with his legs or the one for 300 plus against Missouri to beat them on national television. Yeah, you draw a little bit more. And Heisman will be in the same sentence definitely a few times to start the year, and hopefully by the time late October, November rolls around, those two words still continue to be said in the same sentence.
Here's one more from Lenoris, a quick hit here. And again, we always joke about this. You know, the backup quarterback's always the most popular guys on the team. Well, it may not be the case right now, but here's Lenoris on the guys he's working with at his spot.
No, it's fine. So I knew Cutter from high school. We trained together with Coach Ramon. So, I mean, that was nothing really new. Just Air's a cool guy from Ohio State. He's from Atlanta. I think I trained him before, too, a while back. So, I mean, it was like nothing like brand new, but we just got it rolling.
And, of course, Dante Reno, part of that mix as well. Yeah, Air Nolan's from Atlanta. I think that's, you know, I'm not this season, obviously, but that's a sneaky good pickup, at least on paper, Elijah. I mean, because the job at Ohio State is going to be open again. And look, Air may have seen some things there, or maybe he wanted to be closer to home. There's a host of reasons these days why kids transfer, but you know, his high school tape and numbers and you know, recruitment are as big as anybody's. So again, that could be a sneaky good one for Carolina one day.
One of the reasons why I like it is because it does give you a succession plan in theory, because obviously they're still battling it out right now, but it gives you one in theory in case Lenoris Sellers has the year that I think we all expect him to have. Because, like, think about, like, you know, from Lenoris's perspective, you grow upon what you ended last year with, and you take your game to the next level. and you're draft eligible, guarantee you the feedback he gets is going to be really positive, because there's going to be a lot of quarterback thirsty teams in the draft this year. Because how many franchises right now are on holdovers because they might not be sold on quarterbacks in this year's draft, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be in line for a few, maybe even a team in New Orleans that I like to watch on a Sunday to Sunday basis. Might be once they get an extra year of someone like Derek Carr and his massive contract off the books with a new coach in who's offensive minded. There's going to be a lot of situations like that. So in case that were to happen and he does elevate his draft stock to the point of that's a type of a Godfather offer from the NFL that you get, then you do have a leader in the clubhouse in theory if that were to happen. And if Lenoris decides to stay, that's great. And you're going into 2026 with the same type of hype and hope that you have for this offense that you do coming into 2025. So I think really it's that next level 4D chess type thing that makes the Aaron Nolan acquisition so juicy.
Going to be fun to see. Headlines of the day coming up for you. More on Carolina women's basketball. Elijah covering the team down there in Tampa. We had a lot of that for you. And a couple of pretty big money moves in the National Football League. That'll be part of the headlines. Drive around the SEC, too. You are listening to the Postgame Show. Guys, as we get older, sometimes things are just slowing down. You're just not feeling like you want to, like you used to. And you may say, why is that? It can't just be age, can it? Well, no, there can be a whole lot of factors. But don't wait for it to go away, or don't hope that some, quote, magic pill on television is going to make things change for you. No, instead, go see true medical professionals like our good friend Dan Balknight and his team at the Men's Clinic. You get a one-on-one consultation. They'll talk with you about everything you do every day, what you go through, how old you are, what your habits are, what your diet's like. And then they'll put together a plan that gets you back to feeling like you used to and like you want to. No such thing as a one-size-fits-all treatment at the Men's Clinic. Again, these are true medical professionals ready to help you out. Set up a free consultation, 803-875-MENS. Learn more online at themensclinicsc.com.
From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. A few accidents to get to you that are causing some issues on the roadways. We'll start with some good news, and that's that the incident previously reported on I-77 northbound at Garner's Ferry Road near Exit 9 has been cleared, so traffic's moving pretty smoothly through there. But we still have some accidents causing some issues, starting with one on I-20 westbound at US 178 and Exit 39, one at Highway 262 at US 378 and Garner's Ferry Road, one on Farrow Road at Highway 555 at Highway 277, and lastly, one on Blythewood Road at Wilson Boulevard.
I'm telling you, that one just never gets old. It just does not. Welcome back into the final hour of the postgame show as well. Yeah, it's the headlines of the day. Jay Phillips, Terry Ford at Master Control here in the Herndon Chevy Studios. Elijah Campbell in downtown Tampa covering the women's Final Four, which is where we will start. Elijah was in the locker room earlier with some availability for the players. Malaysia Fulwiley also had a larger availability today. And I don't have the sound, but I'll read you the quote. She says, when it came to the UCLA and Connecticut games, quote, "We didn't have our great games versus them, and the teams that we played had outstanding games. They couldn't miss. So it makes me hope and pray and feel like the roles are going to be reversed. We're going to be the ones not able to miss. We're going to be the ones that lock in and play better basketball. We just have to go out there and show that our best basketball has yet to come. It motivates me because we owe them one." Malaysia Fulwiley speaking today. Elijah, you saw a lot of this team today, and while tomorrow's opponent is one they certainly, feel very confident in being able to beat because they've done so twice by, a combined 34 points in those two games. Yeah. They didn't with Connecticut and UCLA. But there is not one person associated with South Carolina women's basketball that lacks for confidence. They won't go into a UConn or UCLA game should they get it, and that's a big if, feeling worried about it. But the bigger thing tomorrow is what Vic Schaefer wants to throw at them. That's been one of your big things this week is that chess match between two very successful head coaches. Dawn continues to have the upper hand, but Vic knows his team can beat South Carolina. They've done it. They've done it. And like we said this week, whether you win by 1 or 100, you won the game. Texas won by 4 in Austin, but they won the game. This game's not in Austin, and South Carolina is very motivated to do more. But we've seen in the last weekend that teams that assert themselves properly have every chance to beat South Carolina. So to me, there ain't a Sunday without a Friday.
Ain't that the truth too? You don't want them, don't want any element of overlooking, and at least in a lot of the players that I talked to today are very focused, and they're very focused. What I like, at least on the execution part. I feel like they're very confident in the game plan because you have two examples of total proof of concept by absolutely wearing out Texas in those two games. Because we alluded to those two wins. Because those two wins weren't close, man. The game in Columbia wasn't close the entire time. That game in Greenville was a runaway in the second quarter, and you basically cruised for the entire second half. I think from a physical standpoint, they feel good about what they got against Texas. They just got to make sure they don't beat themselves. And I think there is that motivating factor of it's not maybe looking ahead to either UConn or UCLA, but there's a hunger to get to that point, right? And they know
that's a great way to put it, man. Like you so want that you've got to do what you do tomorrow night because you so want that chance on Sunday.
Exactly. You know that you don't get that chance to prove that you're better than those teams if you don't just absolutely take care of business in advance on Friday. So I think there's every bit as much of that. So if anyone, I guess, would hear or read that quote from Malaysia and look at it as overlooking, I wouldn't think of it as overlooking Texas. I would definitely think of it as that's the motivating factor right here, right? I mean, what did Raven Johnson talk about all year last year? They're on a revenge tour.
Right.
This year is a little bit of a different type of revenge tour because two of the teams that beat you the worst are the ones that are on the other side of this bracket. And I can just imagine the level of eagerness to get out on the floor, take care of business against Texas, and then lock in on that opponent. And one thing that I will mention in terms of a possible advantage, Jay, is playing that first game.
Yeah.
Because last year, and this is something I just haven't gotten to talk about as much, but I think I do believe there is an advantage of playing that first game. So last year, you get done with that game, you cruise against NC State in the second half, you end up winning and advancing, you're out of that gym, the players are at least pretty early. They get to physically rest up. I remember going to the press conference after that Iowa and Connecticut game, just because that was just such a wild game and an incredible experience to be able to go see that. So I went into the post-game presser, and I realized, man, it's getting pretty late around here, right? Like it's awfully late. And I remember taking a picture of the media scrum that was around Caitlin Clark when she left the podium. Because, that alone, the media following her, they followed her around like she was the Beatles, right? And I remember taking a picture of it, and I'm looking back at my phone right now at her being hounded by reporters after her press conference, and it's well after 12. It is 12:15. So she's not even getting back to the locker room till 15 minutes after midnight. Right. That's a pretty late night. And then, of course, you have a whole day to rest and prepare. But the advantage you get from that first game, especially with all the media that is required afterwards. We all know how long the last 5 minutes of that UConn-Iowa game went last year. Right. I think that off of pure adrenaline and enthusiasm to get off to that big lead, and once you saw South Carolina start to lock in, take advantage of their bench, be able to put fresh legs out there, that Iowa just wore down against all that pressure and the waves of defensive pressure that Caitlin Clark and that team had to see in the second half. They just didn't have the horses to keep up with them at that point. And I think them playing the first game on Friday presents them a similar type of advantage too.
We'll have more from Elijah on this matchup tomorrow night coming up here in just a little bit. Let's continue our integrated media headlines of the day. Last night, bottom of the ninth, 5-5. Shohei Ohtani at the plate. Solo shot to straightaway center field. Wins the game for the Dodgers. They go to 8-0. Atlanta now falls to 0-7. Braves traveling back home today. They are off and will host Miami tomorrow night. Braves jumped out to a 3-0 lead, also had a 5-2 lead at one point. In fact, I think they were actually, it was 5-0 for a minute. Yeah, it was actually got all the way up to 5-0, not just 5-2. And the Dodgers clawed their way back. So Atlanta is the only winless team in Major League Baseball. I don't know what more they're going to need to do. Nothing's going right, man. Last night they scored some runs, and you think if you're up 5-0, I don't care who you're playing, you can find a way to hold on and win that game. But and look, the Dodgers are playing out of their minds at this point. I don't know. I'm at a loss as both a fan and an observer. I know Acuna's not back, and I know Strider's hurt, and whatever. But you got to look. I was kind of on this road trip, Elijah. I'll be honest. Cloninger and I talked about this off the air the other day. I was kind of, just because I know the Padres and Dodgers are good and it's opening weekend and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I'm kind of prepared for a 2-5 start. I'd like to think they could do 4-3 or 3-4, but I was actually going to be like okay with 2-5. I did not. I didn't envision this.
Well, because that's what you kind of expect when you go on that middle of the season West Coast road trip, right? You probably end up losing more games than not because you are playing A, good teams, B, good teams multiple time zones away, and that's all already kind of hard, like especially once you get into the grind of the season. So like a 2-5 West Coast road trip result is kind of just baked into your regular season result, right? but not 0-7 to start the year, and already putting yourself behind the 8 ball this early into the season.
And you blew 2 of them, so they're alone. You had, you blew opening day, and you blew it last night. Or maybe in between, you just didn't have much of a chance, but we'll see. Again, Braves off today. Boy, do they need it, but they're back in Atlanta, and they will host the Marlins over the weekend. Some NFL news for you here. Let's start with the one we had a little bit earlier, and that was Geno Smith has signed a brand new deal. Let me get back to this. Sorry, here we go. Geno Smith, a 2-year, $75 million extension with the Raiders, the team he joined in the offseason. He had a year left on his deal when they got him, so he'll make a little over $30 million this year, guaranteed to make $66.5 million, and incentives could push the value of this deal to $85.5 million. Geno Smith, at age 34, having a career resurgence with Seattle, and is now tied to Vegas through the 27 season. They traded a third-round pick to get Geno Smith last month. More NFL news. The Cardinals have reached a 4-year deal with Trey McBride that, believe it or not, will make him the highest paid tight end in National Football League history. Now, that's because inflation and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if this means the Chiefs have to do something for Travis Kelce. We'll find out. But Trey McBride, a 4-year, $76 million deal. It includes $43 million guaranteed, a shade over, I guess, right at $19 million average per year. Kelce was the previous highest paid tight end in history at $17.1 million. McBride is 25, had 111 catches last year for 1,146 yards and 3 touchdowns. So they are locking that young man up for the foreseeable future. So good for him. And let's see, one more NFL note for you. Joe Milton has been traded today to the Dallas Cowboys. The Patriots sending Joe and a 7th-round pick to Dallas for the Cowboys' 5th-round pick this month. The Cowboys needed a backup. Cooper Rush signing a deal to go back up Lamar Jackson. And the Cowboys had wanted Jacoby Brissett, but he signed to go play in Phoenix. They also looked at Drew Lock, who last year was with the Giants, but decided against that one. So they traded for Joe Milton. Will the Cowboys go get a quarterback in the draft becomes a real story now?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, how much do they trust Dak Prescott to finish a 17-game regular season? The answer to that question would answer the draft question, right? Because at that point, if you have a quarterback that you can't rely upon to finish a regular season, and Dak Prescott has had some injury issues that has forced him to miss games, that's why so many people in America know who Cooper Rush is. Right. Maybe you do end up drafting somebody in the later rounds to just see if you find a diamond in the rough, right? Maybe you don't take somebody like Jackson Dart or Tyler Shuck from Louisville. Maybe you wait a little bit and take somebody maybe in the 5th round as well, or not 5th round, but you take somebody in that with that 7th round pick and just see if you can catch a flyer and try to find a diamond in the rough, someone to compete with Joe Milton. Because the way NFL teams talk about Joe Milton, it's like they didn't watch him in college. Right, they just watched him in those preseason games when he threw the he throws ball super hard, super fast, not caring about where it actually ends up going. So eventually they'll end up seeing that in practice. Like, okay, maybe we do need a 3rd stringer in here to give us something if it becomes a total nightmare in game situations if Dak goes down. But if they do, I think they end up drafting a quarterback pretty late, maybe not investing a top 4-round pick in it.
Dak missed 9 games last year and 5 games in 2022 because of injury. So he has, and he had surgery last year on a hamstring. So he's, and he's not getting any younger, man. It's hard to believe, but Dak Prescott, y'all, has been in the league as an everyday starter since 2016.
Almost a decade.
Yeah,
wow.
it doesn't
Good
really
Lord.
feel
What?
that way. Yeah, it doesn't feel that way. But he has been the
When you
Cowboys'
put it
everyday
like that.
starter since the 2016 season. So there's that for you. And
I mean,
finally,
it does feel like they've been talking about him on First Take for a decade. That's for sure.
Finally, word came down from FIFA that the United States will be hosting the 2031 Women's World Cup. Of course, the United States, along with Canada and Mexico, hosting the Men's Cup in 2026, and the United States is hosting the Summer Olympics out in L.A. in 2028. So the USA hosting the 2031 Women's World Cup. The UK will get the 2035 Women's World Cup. Those announcements were made today over in, I guess, in Switzerland at FIFA headquarters. So there you go. That's our integrated media headlines of the day. 803-948-8327 for all your home theater needs and so much more. Call our good friends at Integrated Media. More of Elijah's thoughts on what he learned today from the Gamecock women's basketball team ahead of tomorrow's national semifinal. You're listening to the Postgame Show. You ever wake up and just go, I can hardly move. I don't know what the heck's going on. I might need to do something about this. Well, one of the things you can do about it is go see the pros at the Joint Chiropractic Centers. Local owners Janet and Bob Keene have been doing this for a long, long time, and it's really simple what they want to do for you. They want you to maintain a healthy body and prevent those issues that make you feel just too stiff, back, neck, shoulder, or joint pain. If you've never been to a chiropractic center, a $29 initial consultation and exam and adjustment can let you know exactly what's going on. And if you become a regular at the Joint, not only can you see them here in Columbia, but they've got centers all across the country. If you travel for work, for sports, for vacation, you can get in and out quickly. Monday through Friday, 10 to 7, Saturdays, 10 to 4. Here in Columbia, Harbison, Forest Drive, Roberts Branch, and Sunset Boulevard in Lexington, you don't have to feel bad to feel better at the Joint. 19 minutes after 5 o'clock here on a Thursday afternoon. Welcome back in. It's the Postgame Show. Jay Phillips and Elijah Campbell with you. Terry Ford is at Master Control as Elijah is down in Florida. Much to my surprise and maybe chagrin, Elijah did not stop off at Disney World. No, none of those four parks. Well, I just figured I could tell that you weren't because, for one thing, the first week of April at Disney is one of their busier weeks because of spring break. And since I don't hear a bunch of screaming children and screaming parents telling their kids to quit screaming, I knew at that point that you were actually at a place where it was mostly just adults doing work.
I think you're doubting the level of my influence here because maybe I told them to shut up and that I'm doing work and that I want to do my show.
Stop having
and
fun,
ride the
you
ride.
kids. I'm on the phone.
Zip it. I'm doing big boy radio, big boy work.
That's right.
And I used my big boy tone, and I scared them. So I think you might be just doubting the sphere of my influence.
Well, that is. Well, you are 8 feet tall, and you can be frightening to children. So there's that.
Use a grown-up voice.
That's
scare him a little bit.
Elijah's not really 8 feet tall, but he's close. He's close.
Close enough to party.
So continuing to look at this matchup tomorrow night, and you know, I don't know if I call it a concern. But when you look at the last, like Indiana led at halftime, right? And then Carolina won by 11, I think it was. But Indiana, you know, played well and they had a lead. And that was in Carolina's gym. And then last week, South Carolina trailed in the fourth quarter against both of those opponents. And again, you won the game. So I'm not here to go like, you know, again, no, they won the basketball game.
Yes.
But do the Texas Longhorns see South Carolina as some type of wounded animal? And what is Carolina doing to potentially counter that? I think maybe sometimes, Elijah, in sports, you know, we look for reasons, not so much excuses, but reasons as to why, you know, a team may be playing differently. And I can't help, because Carolina, and you were there firsthand, Carolina was so dominant in Greenville. They looked the part of who they are, right? I mean, they just beat the doors off of every. I mean, you beat Texas for the title by 19 points. But then you had a week off. And then you were in your gym against a team you were supposed to beat, and again, comfortably enough against Indiana in the second round. Again, you won by double digits, but you were losing at home at halftime, not 3-0 or something like that. You know. Is it a layoff thing? Again, some of it is certainly the opponent, but I just wonder where Carolina feels like they themselves are, knowing that in a postseason tournament, they look the part everybody expects, and in this tournament, they have not. They're still here, and again, that's all that matters. I get it, but there is a caveat to how you look and what you have to do next.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely that sentiment of, like, it's survive in advance. You do what you can to just win the game. That's the main objective. But I think every player in that locker room is cognizant of the offensive struggles, especially in the last two games. Now, that second half against Indiana, they picked it up a lot, right? They made the adjustments, and they showed why they were the better team, why they are the 1 seed, and Indiana was not. They did a really good job of that. But against Maryland and Duke, you saw a lot more offensive struggle, especially against a Maryland team that isn't very good defensively. Now, an offensive struggle against Duke is maybe to be a little more expected, just because Duke is legitimately a top 5 defensive unit in the country per Torvik. So that makes a little more sense, but I think they understand that the offense isn't working right now. And a lot of that is, at least from my observation on the floor, I don't think you're just generating enough three-point looks. And that's just math, too. If you're not hitting a ton of threes, your likelihood of scoring 75 to 80 points in a game is a little slimmer, right? You got to be able to stack up three-point jumpers, and they haven't hunted those, I've thought, particularly well. And they oftentimes have had to rely on their physicality to get fouls. I think the biggest reason they beat Duke was because Chloe took over a little bit in the fourth quarter of that game, and she drew 8 fouls. I thought that was massive, right? She got to the line 10 times for 10 free throws, made 7 of them, and that made a lot of difference in a 4-point win, right? But I don't know if that is going to be a formula for success against a team like Texas. And I think the thing I'm fascinated most in seeing with how Texas tries to exploit that is how they play on South Carolina drives, how much they overhelp. Right, so like let's say Mylasia Fulwiley gets the ball like at the top of the key, and she gets into the lane, and she's got her defender on her back hip. How much further over is an Ashley Jones coming over to help, or a Kayla Olaker coming over to help to block the shot, considering that they have one of the best rim protecting units in college basketball with those two bigs. I mean, teams shoot about 4% worse around the rim than average against Texas. How much are you overhelping? Because if South Carolina is able to get drives, and they can shift the defense around and make Texas have to over-rotate, and that's when you can get into a little bit of trouble. So what Vic Schaefer does in this game defensively is what I'm really, really excited to see, and see if it's anything different at all than what we saw in those first 3 games right now. Because I think they understand now that South Carolina's having a little bit of trouble scoring, but it's not because they're not scoring inside. They're scoring points in the paint, and they still, against against Maryland, rather, was still able to score about 50 bench points, or not bench points, points in the paint. Like they got to the painted area a ton in that game, and they were still, I think they even had 30 paint points against Duke, which makes up well over half of what you scored in the entire game. So seeing how they adjust to that with how South Carolina's played in these last 2 games is a pretty fascinating dynamic.
Is it too simple to say, to your point about finding a way to take more shots out on the perimeter? And I know she comes off the bench, but I feel like if you could get Tessa going again, there could be a real chain reaction. And that's not to say that Raven or Tahina can't make the threes. They can. Bree Hall can shoot them from time to time. But it just feels like for what Tessa did last year, what she's done, she did it against Texas, I believe, in the tournament game, in the SEC tournament game, that is. If you get her going, is that maybe the single biggest positive factor that could occur for this ball club?
It's one of them. I mean, if it's not number 1, it's number 2, right? Like, I mean, you need more out of her in this game. Yeah, because 12 minutes and 1 shot attempt like she had against Duke won't cut it. It's not. You need her to be a threat to score because of just the attention she can take from everybody else too. The best thing that can happen to her is checking into the game late first quarter and knocking down the first shot that comes to her. Because now you have to sell out to stop that. Because if South Carolina's hitting threes, as good as they are defensively, you are going to have to fight fire with fire at that point. Like the Texas's best shot in this game is to drag it into the same type of game that Duke did, and then maybe your collection of mid-range jumpers takes over, because there's probably not a team in women's college basketball that shoots more mid-range twos than Texas. Over a fifth of their shots come from that mid-range outside the paint, not three-point area, right? Like that's a lot. That's a heavy reliance. And if you get them into a three-point shooting contest, you're more likely to win. Straight up. Texas is a sub 30% three-point shooting team. So if you can knock that down, that you play into that game plan right there of making them have to match you with the three-point attempts, and B, it just scrambles the defense, because we know what Tessa can do off the dribble. She's gotten significantly better this year off of the bounce and getting by her defender. At that point, Texas is constantly having to cover for their loss off of the dribble, and then they're not getting out to the other lanes and other passing lanes and other options. That also opens up the floor for Chloe and Sanaya to be able to crash the boards too, and it just makes life significantly harder for Texas, and Tessa can be the key that unlocks that.
More from Tampa coming up here in just a little bit. We'll have the drive around the SEC on the other side of the break. Also have some more sound from Coach Paul Maneri ahead of Carolina's road trip to Starkville. Two struggling teams looking for a series victory. More from Columbia and Tampa on the postgame show.
From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. A few accidents to get to you. They're causing issues on the roadways, including a vehicle on fire on I-26 westbound before Columbia Avenue near exit 91, an accident Highway 262 at US 378 and Garners Ferry Road, Hallbrook Drive at Garners Ferry Road, Fontaine Road at Highway 277, Farrow Road at Highway 555 at Highway 277, and Divine Street near Woodrow Street.
It is Drive Around the SEC time here on a Thursday afternoon. Welcome back in. Jay Phillips, Terry Ford at Master Control, and Elijah Campbell in beautiful Tampa, Florida, Heath Klein's hometown. Have you been dropping Heath's name just to, get perks, maybe free coffee at a Dunkin' Donuts or, some such, maybe free beer at like Cigar City Brewing, which is fantastic. Have a High Life. You've had a High Life before, right?
Oh, I have. It's fantastic.
No,
how do you think I got this hotel room, brother?
There you go. There you go.
Just name dropped at the counter, and they paid me to stay here.
That's nice. Well, Heath Klein has that kind of power, so there's that. You should try to go to that brewery if you get a chance. Like, hopefully you're still like able to be there on Saturday, holding over to Sunday. So.
Right.
And since I know David will be there, maybe you and Cloninger could go hit up. That's a place I've never been in my trips to the Outback Bowl. I should probably go do that. Their beer, actually, the first time I ever had.
Beer's fantastic.
Oh, the first time I ever had a High Life IPA was at Disney World. And I remember asking the bartender, I was like, hey, where, I could tell Cigar City. He's like, yeah, man, right over in Tampa, we get them, they're over here a bunch. And showed me like 3 different kinds of beer they had from them. But I was like, nah, that's that West Coast IPA right there is all I need. So a fantastic West Coast
stuff,
IPA.
man.
And it is, what's cool? It's technically made on the West Coast. See what I did there?
Ah.
See what I did there?
Just not the West Coast of the United States.
Yeah, well, it's the West Coast of Florida.
Which is in the United States.
That's a United State.
That is certainly a United State.
Right? So there's that. I try to technicalities, my man.
The fine print's the fine print, man.
That's right.
We don't make the rules; we just follow them.
Baseball tonight. Just one series getting underway in conference play. It'll be Oklahoma hosting LSU. First pitch in Norman is at 7:00 Eastern time. Standings right now across the conference. These are conference records only. Arkansas, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas all at 8-1. LSU by themselves at 7-2 in 5th place, technically, at least if it was tournament seeding. Alabama and Mississippi are at 6-3. Oklahoma is 5-4. Auburn, Kentucky, Vanderbilt 4-5. Florida, Mississippi State, Carolina, A&M 1-8. Missouri bringing up the rear at 0-9. So that's what's going on, and we'll give you more on baseball this weekend. Mr. Ford, if you would, please, sir, a couple of more cuts here from Coach Maneri. Again, earlier in the show, we had John Whittle on. We talked about Nathan Hall and Ethan Petrie. When I say being dropped in the order, Nathan from cleanup to the 3-hole and Ethan from the 3 to the cleanup spot. What does he want now? Cut 15, please, Terry. What does Coach Maneri want when he reshuffles the lineup from new hitters 1 and 2?
I didn't say I don't like to walk. I don't want our guys going up there looking for walks.
Yeah.
I want our guys being ready to hit. It's a mindset. You know, if you're sending guys up there with the idea, hey, come on, we want you to draw a walk, then how can you then, on the other hand, expect them to get clutch hits for you when they have to swing the bat? It's a mindset. You have to have an aggressive mindset and confidence in yourself as a hitter. I didn't say I didn't like walks. What I don't like is guys going up there very unaggressive looking for walks. You know, if they earn a walk, take the walk. You know, if you're a table setter where you're leading off an inning or something and you walk, it's a wonderful thing. You get in the inning started. But somebody's got to be able to drive the runs in. And if it's any specific, name the person. If he's going up there with the idea, I'm going to be really selective, I'm going to draw walks, I'm going to get on base. Oh, that's wonderful. But what happens now in the 8th inning when I need you to drive in the runs? You're not ready to hit because your whole game is centered around drawing walks. That's all I was saying.
It's interesting, Elijah. You know, I get where Coach is coming from. It's not that I don't like walks. I don't want you going up there looking for one. But I do wonder sometimes, and this isn't to directly question or challenge Paul's coaching. Again, this is one of the better coaches in the history of the sport. But the mindset of a kid, like, man, Coach wants me to be aggressive, but where do I draw my own line? And I just wonder right now, too, if some of that is in some kids' heads as they, you know, figure him out, he figures them out. And as you made a great point earlier in the show about this lineup shuffle, you know, it's the middle of the season. You've played 30 games. In fact, you're beyond the halfway point of the regular season. Certainly not in regular season conference play, but of 56 games in the regular season, tomorrow night's game 31. So you've passed a halfway point. You are who you are. And I just, how much of a different approach you can really take these next few weeks is going to tell us a lot about whether or not this team has any shot. But you don't want it to stay in your head too much. That's a bad recipe.
And that's kind of the risk you take of running a different lineup and doing different things and it failing too, right? Because then you might damage the psyche even more. Because imagine, like, this is a hypothetical here, like you go to Starkville, you run the same type of lineup out there, nobody is table setting, and Nathan Hall is still going up there with nobody on on base, and you still end up stranding runners on, and you have the similar results to what you've had all season long in SEC play, and you either get swept or lose, 2 of 3, then it's like, wow, coach is even making changes and we still can't produce runs, right? Like, that's even more damaging to the psyche too, right? And it might be different maybe if you lose like 13-11, and then your problems are different. They have just shifted. You are playing whack-a-mole with your problems at that point. But that's one of the risks that you run with it. And if we're talking about kind of managing the mentality of your players, there are a lot of pros taking this risk and make this a worthy risk to take. And then there's also just a flip side of it, that if it does, fail and the offense continues to not be able to generate enough runs that's adequate to win SEC games, it can do further damage, maybe more damage than what losing already does.
Yeah. On that note, one more here from Coach Maneri before the team left for Starkville. You finally snapped a 7-game losing streak, but in conference play, it's not been good. What are you doing? What's the message between the ears for the guys moving forward?
Well, Jack, that's it. That's the advantage of being old, and coaching so long and so many games. I've seen it all. I've been at the top of the mountain, and I've also had some really disappointing times too. We had a 7-game losing streak when I was at LSU the year after we won the national championship. Went to Ole Miss. I think we got walked off 3 games that weekend, if I'm not mistaken. And then we lost our midweek game, and then we had to go to Florida and lost 3 close games there. So we lost 7 in a row. And, so I've experienced what we've gone through this year. And because of that, I can tell the guys, if this happens, especially in this league, it's if you don't do what it takes to win, you're going to lose in this league. And some games we played, I thought, really well and still lost. Some games we didn't play so well and lost. And but there's always hope. Like the old saying goes, when tough times hit you, the tough guys show up, you know what I mean? Or something. I don't know how that saying goes. The tough times don't last, but tough people do. So you just try to keep their confidence up and make them believe that they can accomplish things. And there's no easy way. You just got to go out there and play better.
Yeah, no easy way. Again, State is in the same boat, Elijah. I'll be curious because Duty Noble Field is one of the nicest and biggest and loudest in the Southeastern Conference. But will a 1-8 home team really draw that crowd out tomorrow night? What might that atmosphere be like? Could that play to Carolina's advantage? Those are some things to look at.
I mean, what the hell else is there doing in Starkville, Mississippi? Gonna spend extra time on the farm? You can take the wife out to Chili's?
Do they have a Chili's in Starkville?
Maybe take the kids to see a movie?
They have a theater in Starkville?
Assuming the theater's still there?
I'm sure
if
there
is one.
It's a big college. They have stuff.
I mean, they have electricity there, so I mean, maybe you're gonna stream Netflix. I mean, I don't know. The hell else is there to do in Starkville? That's the one thing. Now, if Starkville, Mississippi was in I don't know, Atlanta, then yeah, there's a good chance you might play in an empty ballpark. But that team can be 1-80 in SEC play, and you still gonna get folks there with cowbells because the hell else are you gonna do?
For those of you on the board of the Starkville Chamber of Commerce, it's E_Campbell 3.
For those in the Starkville Chamber of Commerce, A, I'm sorry for you, and B, I'll say it again with my chest.
That's our drive around the SEC, brought to you by Herndon Chevy, your hometown Chevy dealers.
Better watch out for the cow bombs in that pasture.
Stop by the showroom and see why Herndon makes you smile. Some final thoughts from Elijah on what he learned today around Carolina media availability ahead of tomorrow's national semifinal. This is the Starkville Loving postgame show. All right, welcome back in. Final few minutes of the post-game show here on a Friday. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. Terry and Dave are like the Rock and Roll Express on the board, like a little tag team thing going on right now. So they're both down here. That's an all. I don't know any of the new tag team wrestling guys, so I just have to go back to my day.
I know nothing about wrestling. The same way you could not spot a random NBA player, you could tell me a random fake wrestler name. Like make something up and be like, yeah, sounds right. That sounds like a wrestler.
Yeah, no, Rock and Roll Express. I remember like Ted DiBiase and the Junkyard Dog. Road Warriors were really popular. Hulk and Animal. There's others. But anyway.
Anderson brothers.
Who?
Lars and Gene Anderson.
Oh, yeah, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Sure. I remember them. Yeah,
Sure that's not like the actual name of like the Minnesota Wild defensive pairing.
Is it? Or it should be, if not. I mean, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew.
Be.
Yeah, Gene, Lars, Ole. Classic.
Sounds fake.
Classic Norwegian names from Minnesota. Gotta love it, man.
Probably from a long line of Olympic skiers.
I don't know. Anyway, so hey, before I get out of here, I just this is like a kind of a PSA for the kids. But this past weekend, I saw this story. Linwood, Washington. That's a Seattle suburb. The police department was busy at a Fred Meyer grocery store. They made some shoplifting arrests, Elijah, and you heard me say arrests. It wasn't 2. It wasn't 3. This is all in one day, I might add. It wasn't 4. It wasn't even 5. Elijah Campbell, it wasn't even 10.
Oh, no.
Elijah Campbell, it wasn't even 15.
What the hell's going on over there?
The Linwood Police Department, Linwood, Washington, made 17 shoplifting arrests in one day at the exact same Fred Meyer grocery store. Detectives say they saw people brazenly, quote, confidently shopping, loading up carts, and simply walking out of the store. It said that in many of these cases, the folks made absolutely no effort to try and hide the items they were stealing. Well, how are you going to hide it in a grocery cart? You can see through them.
Right. It's pretty easy to identify.
Over half the individuals arrested did not live in Linwood. The department issued the statement after the 17 arrests, quote, "Please do not come to Linwood to steal from our community. If you do, you will be held accountable to include arrest and possible jail time." By the way, at the same store in February, they also had another day where they arrested 14 people for shoplifting. Now, I don't know what's going on at this Fred Meyer, but this sounds like, now, I know Terry Ford used to, you spent some time in Seattle, and I know you grew up in a fine neighborhood in Baltimore, but I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, that's 31 shoplifting attempts at one store on 2 different days within a month of each other. I mean, is this, what are we, I guess that's a day in the life?
I used to shoplift at the Needle, Seattle.
Yeah.
I used to shoplift in the gift shop all the time. What's the point? Space Needle gift shop was great.
Yeah, but they don't have big giant shopping carts, do they? You just walk out?
Walk out, man.
Is that what you learned as a kid? Like, what, you just go to the Inner Harbor down to the... Well, they didn't have the aquarium when you were a kid in Baltimore, did they? That came later.
Don't think it was quite there yet.
Yeah, it came later. Terry's the guy who was ripping stars off the original flag that Francis Scott Key was using for the anthem.
Which point?
Like
made a few extra bucks.
If you ever go see that thing in Washington, like, why has it got so many things? That's a true story. Did you know that? For years, they knew it was the original flag that Francis Scott Key was looking at in Baltimore Harbor. And people would cut pieces of it off. Like, I mean, somebody right now, somebody in their attic, like their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma or grandpa, has a piece of the flag, and it's like, what is this piece of red fabric? I don't know.
We just always have kept it.
Yeah,
It survived bombardment, but it couldn't survive my scissors.
And then, like, you go to the Smithsonian, and you're like, look at that square that's missing. That's the same one.
But you know what happens, right? Then you go to get it out of your basement where you've hidden it, and your Aunt Edna, I did some cleaning. I
Right.
threw all that stuff out.
Yeah, or it just disintegrates because it's 200 years old. Anyway, wow, 31 in 2 different days within a month of each other. 31 shoplifting attempts. So, my message to the kids is, Elijah, where the police say that some people just didn't even care. At least pretend that you care as you walk out of the store, and then they won't even look at you.
Yeah, and Terry might agree with this too, as a seasoned vet thief himself. You know what the lesson here is? Know the scout, right?
Yep.
In sports and in shoplifting, know the scout.
Yep.
If the scouting report says there have been 30-plus arrests made in that place for the last couple, 2 different instances, don't go.
Yeah.
Don't
it.
do it because they will catch you.
Try
know
another
the
store,
scout.
kids.
Know your personnel.
They're looking at you.
Preparation.
That's right. Try another store.
Idiots.
No. Please don't
Foolish.
shoplift. Please don't
Read the
shoplift.
scouting report,
pay,
kids.
Pay for your groceries, kids. More from Elijah tomorrow in Tampa. Thanks to Jordan and John for joining us. Thanks to Terry and Dave. Y'all have a great night, and we'll do it again tomorrow.
From the Wetzel's Automotive Traffic Studios, I'm Elijah Campbell. A few accidents to get to that are causing some issues on the roadways, starting with one on Devine Street near Woodrow Street, Fontaine Road at Highway 277, Hallbrook Drive at Garner's Ferry Road. A vehicle on fire causing some traffic backup on 26 westbound before Columbia Avenue near Exit 91. We have accidents on US 176 at Broad River Road at I-20, and lastly, one on US 378 at Lower Richland Boulevard.